The conference room fell silent the moment the contract landed in front of me. Sign it. My father-in-law didn't raise his voice. He never had to. Chairman Victor Hale sat at the head of the polished oak table, one hand resting on his cane, the other tapping the thick stack of legal papers. Across from me, my brother-in-law Adrian leaned back with a satisfied smile. "You've managed the compliance division long enough, Ethan," he said casually. "It's time the family trusted someone with vision." Vision. The word almost made me laugh. For 7 years, I had worked 18-hour days to save Hale Dynamics from lawsuits, bribery accusations, failed acquisitions, and disasters no shareholder would ever know existed. Whenever Adrian made another reckless investment, whenever Marcus signed another illegal procurement contract, whenever Victor demanded impossible results, I cleaned everything, quietly, without asking for credit. Now they wanted me to surrender every authority I had. The room smelled of expensive coffee and polished leather. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, rain battered the city skyline. Inside, everyone avoided my eyes. Only my wife, Claire, dared look at me. Even then, she looked away first. "Ethan," she whispered. My fingers rested on the pen. "Don't make this difficult." Victor's voice was colder now. "This is only restructuring. Only restructuring. Compliance. Legal oversight. Executive authorization. Internal investigations. Every department that kept the company honest would belong to Adrian by sunset." I slowly turned the pages. Not because I was reading them. Because I already knew every paragraph. I had rewritten most of them myself. Marcus chuckled, still pretending to be important. Several executives laughed nervously. One of the board members cleared his throat. "Ethan built those departments." Victor slammed his cane against the floor. "They belong to this family. Not to you." The words didn't need saying. I had heard them for years. Marrying Claire never made me one of them. It only made me useful. Claire finally spoke. "Father, maybe Ethan should stay on as an advisor." Victor didn't even acknowledge her. Instead, Adrian leaned forward. "We appreciate everything you've done." His smile widened. "But you've become overly cautious. Caution costs opportunities. It also prevents prison." The words escaped before I could stop them. The room froze. Marcus laughed loudly. "There he goes again. Our walking rulebook." Victor stared at me. "So that's your answer?" I looked around the room. 7 years. Every late night. Every emergency. Every impossible negotiation. Every time I stood between this family and complete ruin. None of it mattered. Not anymore. Something inside me simply stopped hurting. I picked up the pen. Claire's breathing caught. "Ethan." Without another word. I signed. One signature. Then another. Then the final page. The scratching sound of ink across paper echoed through the room like the closing of a door. Adrian couldn't hide his excitement. Victor immediately pushed the contracts toward the company's secretary. Effective immediately. Marcus clapped slowly. I expected more of a fight. I placed the pen neatly beside the folder. "You'll have everything you asked for." Adrian smirked. "We certainly will." I stood, straightened my tie, collected nothing from the table. As I reached the door, Claire hurried after me. "Ethan." Her voice trembled. I stopped but didn't turn. "You didn't even argue. What would have been the point?" "They're wrong." "I know. I'll talk to father." "No." She hesitated. "You don't sound angry." I was. When? For the first 6 years. Rain splashed against the glass walls. Neither of us spoke. Finally she whispered, "What happens now?" I looked through the window toward the city. "Now, I go home." My office occupied the quietest corner of headquarters. The lights were already off. Someone had packed my personal belongings into 3 cardboard boxes. A courtesy, nothing more. On my desk lay a handwritten note. "Company property retrieved. Please vacate before 6 p.m. No signature. No apology." I smiled faintly. Efficient. I opened the bottom drawer one last time. Empty. Exactly as expected. Every confidential report. Gone. Every encrypted drive. Gone. Every investigation archive. Gone. Someone had been here before me. I wasn't surprised. A knock sounded. Without waiting for permission, Adrian walked inside. "So," he looked around triumphantly. "This office suits me." "It does." He frowned. No sarcasm. "I'm tired." He leaned against the desk. "You know, Ethan, you could have stayed if you'd learned your place." "My place?" "Supporting us." "I did. For 7 years." He laughed. "And now we'll finally unlock this company's potential." I nodded once. I hope you do. Something about my calmness unsettled him. You really aren't hiding anything? I met his eyes. What exactly should I hide? His confidence returned. Nothing. He opened my old filing cabinet. Already empty. He checked another drawer. Nothing. Another. Nothing. You cleaned everything? I dislike clutter. He forced a smile. Very thoughtful. He walked out carrying the master office key. The moment the door closed, I exhaled slowly. Then I looked toward the tiny security camera hidden above the bookshelf. Still blinking. Still recording. Exactly where I had left it. The elevator doors opened into the underground parking garage. My footsteps echoed between concrete pillars slick with rainwater. I placed the 3 cardboard boxes into the trunk of my aging sedan instead of the luxury company car waiting beside it. The driver approached. Mr. Hale instructed me to collect the executive vehicle. I handed him the keys. No problem. He looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry. There is nothing to apologize for. He blinked. Most people expected anger, arguments, bitterness. Instead, I simply closed my trunk. As I pulled away from headquarters, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I answered. Ethan Cross. A familiar voice spoke quietly. They signed. Yes. They took everything? They believe they did. Silence lingered. Then the caller sighed. I still don't understand why you made this so easy. I drove through sheets of rain. Because fighting would have warned them. Because greedy people always searched harder after resistance. Because traps only worked when the prey believed it had won. I'll explain later. The task force. They're ready. And the evidence. Safe. The caller lowered his voice further. The Financial Crimes Bureau is asking whether the company has begun transferring restricted archives. I glanced into the rearview mirror. A black SUV had exited the company garage behind me. Not unusual. Maybe. Tell them to keep watching. You expect movement tonight? I expect greed. The call ended. I drove another 10 minutes before deliberately taking 3 unnecessary turns. The SUV followed. Good. Adrian never trusted anyone completely. That had always been one of his strengths. It would become one of his weaknesses. Home no longer felt like home. The mansion stood behind iron gates overlooking the river. Claire was waiting on the front steps. She hadn't changed out of her work clothes. She looked exhausted. You came. You asked. She opened the front door without speaking. Inside, the house echoed with unnatural silence. Family portraits lined the walls. In every photograph, I stood slightly behind everyone else. Almost invisible, Claire poured tea into 2 cups. Neither of us touched them. Finally she spoke. I know what Father did was wrong. He believes it was necessary. I don't. No. You never wanted power. I wanted accountability. She looked down. Maybe that's why they couldn't trust you. I almost smiled. No. They couldn't trust me because accountability eventually reaches everyone. She rubbed her temples. I wish you had fought. So do they? She looked up sharply. What does that mean? Instead of answering, I stood and walked toward the bookshelf. Behind several business awards sat a faded ceramic mug. Claire frowned. You kept that. It was your mother's. She hated that mug. I know. I carefully turned it upside down. A tiny encrypted flash drive dropped into my hand. Claire stared. What? You never noticed. No. You weren't supposed to. Her expression slowly changed. Ethan, how many things like that exist? I slid the drive into my pocket. I stopped counting. Her face paled. What exactly have you been doing all these years? Protecting all of you. From yourselves. But I didn't say it. Instead, I asked quietly. Claire, if someone steals documents they aren't authorized to possess, who's responsible? The thief. And if they use them? Still the thief. And if every access log identifies them? She stood abruptly. No. I watched realization spread across her face. You knew? I suspected. You planned this. I prepared. They're going through your office right now. They've probably already copied everything. My phone buzzed again. One message. Archive access detected. Multiple unauthorized downloads. Exactly on schedule. Claire grabbed my arm. You have to stop them. I gently removed her hand. I can't. Why not? Because they never listened when I warned them. They'll be arrested. If they've broken the law. They're family. They're adults. Her eyes filled with tears. You still care about them. I do. Then save them. For a long moment, I said nothing. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Finally, I answered. I've spent 7 years saving people determined to drown. I won't pull them under. But I won't jump into the water again either. Across the city, inside Hale Dynamics, someone unlocked the hidden compliance servers using the executive authority Adrian had stolen only hours earlier. Encrypted folders began opening one after another. Each download automatically generated a timestamp. Each timestamp copied itself to an independent government server. Each copied file quietly linked itself to months of documented financial misconduct. No alarms sounded. No warnings appeared. Only silent confirmation after silent confirmation. The trap didn't close with noise. It closed with paperwork. And no one inside the company realized the countdown had already begun. The first call came at 6:17 the next morning. I watched the screen vibrate across the kitchen table while steam rose from a cup of untouched coffee. Adrian Hale. I let it ring until it stopped. A second later, Marcus Hale. Then, Chairman Victor Hale. 3 calls. 3 men who had ignored my advice for years. 3 men who suddenly remembered my number. I placed the phone face down. Outside, dawn spread a pale gray light across the river. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to headquarters. I wasn't preparing damage reports. I wasn't solving someone else's catastrophe. The silence felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. A sharp knock echoed through the apartment. Claire stood outside. She looked as though she hadn't slept. Ethan. I stepped aside. She entered without speaking, her eyes searching my face. They're looking for you. I know. They've called everyone. I know. They think someone hacked the archives. They're wrong. She inhaled slowly. So, it really was them. I nodded. They opened protected evidence. They copied classified investigation files. They used executive authorization under Adrian's name. Claire closed her eyes. My father doesn't understand what he's done. He understands. He just believes consequences belong to other people. Her shoulders trembled. They're saying you'll come back if they apologize. I couldn't help smiling. They still don't know me. At Hale Dynamics, panic had replaced arrogance. Large monitors in the executive boardroom displayed frozen compliance dashboards. Every restricted server had locked itself. Every unauthorized access had been permanently logged. Adrian slammed both hands onto the conference table. Who designed this system? The IT director swallowed hard. Mr. Cross. Marcus turned toward him. Override it. We can't. Then erase the logs. They're mirrored. Delete the mirror. The mirror isn't inside the company. Victor frowned. What does that mean? The room fell silent. Finally, the IT director answered. The compliance architecture automatically synchronizes evidence with external regulatory servers. Victor's face turned white. Who approved that? Another long silence. You did. When? 5 years ago. I never signed anything like that. You delegated the review to Mr. Cross. Victor slowly sat down. For the first time, he remembered. Back then, Ethan had warned everyone. Internal corruption destroys companies faster than competitors. No one had listened. Yet Victor had signed anyway, without reading. My phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't a Hale. Director Owens. The calm female voice spoke immediately. They took the bait. They accessed everything. More than expected. How much? Enough. She paused. Some people would have stopped them. I know. You didn't. I warned them for 7 years. And now, they're making their own decisions. Director Owens remained quiet. She had spent months investigating Hale Dynamics. She also knew something the Hales didn't. I had never worked for the investigation. I had simply refused to destroy evidence. That difference mattered. We'll execute warrants only after financial tracing confirms intent. They'll move money first. You sound certain. I know Adrian. Explain. He thinks evidence is dangerous. Yes. He'll believe deleting money trails solves everything. Owens sighed. So he'll commit another crime. I think so. She thanked me and ended the call. I looked out the window. People often imagined revenge as loud, explosive, violent. Real consequences were quieter. People destroyed themselves one decision at a time. Meanwhile, inside Victor Hale's office, we moved the accounts. Marcus paced anxiously. If investigators freeze them, we're finished. Victor slammed his cane onto the floor. No money moves. We'll look guilty. We already do. Adrian stood by the window. We need Ethan. Marcus scoffed. He'll crawl back. Claire spoke from the doorway. No. Every head turned. He won't. Victor's voice hardened. Convince your husband. He isn't my employee. He's still your husband. Claire met her father's gaze. You stopped treating him like family years ago. Victor's jaw tightened. Enough. No. Her voice shook, but did not break. You humiliated him. You erased everything he built. You expected gratitude. Marcus laughed bitterly. He was paid. Claire spun toward him. You think salary buys loyalty? No. It buys work. Loyalty is earned. The room fell silent. Adrian suddenly asked, Did Ethan tell you anything? Claire hesitated. I prepared. That was all she said. Prepared. Nothing else. Yet the words echoed through the room like thunder. Prepared. Prepared for what? By afternoon, rumors flooded the financial district. Anonymous reports. Leaked emails. Regulatory inspections. Shareholders demanded explanations. The company's stock slipped 5% before lunch. By closing bell. 9. Inside every executive office, people whispered the same question. Where's Ethan Cross? No one asked because they missed me. They asked because problems no longer disappeared overnight. I spent the afternoon in a quiet public library. Not hiding. Thinking. For years I had forgotten what ordinary places looked like. Students whispered over textbooks. An elderly man solved crossword puzzles near the window. A little girl laughed while reading picture books. Normal lives. Lives untouched by boardroom politics. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Meet me. Parking garage C. For PM alone. No signature. I almost ignored it. Instead, I went. Parking garage C smelled of concrete and engine oil. Only a handful of vehicles remained. Footsteps echoed behind me. I didn't turn. I knew you'd come. The voice belonged to Olivia Bennett, former chief financial officer. Resigned 18 months earlier. Officially due to health reasons. Unofficially, because she refused to approve fraudulent overseas transfers. You look healthier, I said. So do you. She smiled faintly. Being unemployed suits us. We walked toward the far end of the garage, away from security cameras. I've been contacted by federal prosecutors. I nodded. They're moving faster than expected. Olivia studied me carefully. You knew they would. I guessed. She laughed softly. You always answer like that. She opened a leather folder. Inside lay dozens of printed bank statements. I kept copies. I know. Her eyebrows lifted. You knew? I hoped. I nearly burned them. I'm glad you didn't. She became serious. Ethan, they're going to accuse you too. I expected that. You aren't worried? I documented every objection. She looked genuinely amazed. You documented everything. I had to. For yourself? No. For the company. She stared at me. Even after everything they did. You still wanted to protect Hale Dynamics? The company employs 12,000 people. My problem was never the employees. It was leadership. Olivia slowly closed the folder. I spent months hating them. I know. I wanted revenge. And now? She smiled. I don't need it anymore. Neither of us noticed the black sedan parked 2 rows away. Inside, Marcus Hale lowered a camera. I knew it. His grin spread slowly. He's meeting witnesses. The private investigator beside him frowned. Should we keep recording? Marcus nodded eagerly. This proves Ethan's working against us. The investigator hesitated. Or what? Or he's cooperating legally. Marcus dismissed the idea. No. He's plotting. Greed had already convinced Marcus that innocence couldn't exist. Every action looked like conspiracy. Every silence looked like betrayal. Exactly as I had expected. That evening, Adrian unlocked a private offshore banking portal. He entered his password. Transferred millions into newly created shell companies. Click confirm. He believed he was protecting family assets. Instead, every emergency transfer triggered automatic anti-money laundering alerts in 3 different jurisdictions. The first notification reached Director Owens at 8:42 p.m. She looked at the report, then quietly whispered, just as Ethan predicted. Across the city, I sat alone on my apartment balcony. The night wind carried distant traffic across the river. For years I had believed carrying everyone's burdens made me strong. Now I finally understood. Strength wasn't endlessly saving people who refused responsibility. Strength was knowing when to step aside and allowing consequences to finish the lesson no warning ever could. At exactly 7:30 the next morning, the front doors of Hale Dynamics opened as they always did. Employees streamed into the marble lobby carrying coffee cups and laptops, exchanging greetings that sounded painfully normal. Then the elevators stopped. Every screen inside the building flickered. A single message appeared across the internal network. Federal investigation in progress. System access restricted. Conversations died instantly. Security guards looked at one another. Receptionists froze. No alarms sounded. No dramatic announcements followed. Only silence. Then the revolving doors turned again. Men and women wearing dark government jackets entered in disciplined rows. Each carried sealed evidence cases. Director Amelia Owens walked in front. Her expression was calm, professional. She didn't need to raise her voice. "We have warrants." Within seconds, legal officers separated executives from ordinary employees. No shouting, no panic, just procedure. It was strangely terrifying. I was watering the small plants on my apartment balcony when Claire called. "They're here." "I know." "You knew?" "I expected today." Her breathing was uneven. "They're searching every office. They'll be thorough. My father says this is all a misunderstanding." I remained quiet. "Ethan, they're opening your old department." "I know. I don't think father understands what they'll find." "No, he doesn't." She lowered her voice. "Should I go there?" "Are you an executive?" "No." "Then stay away. They'll think I'm abandoning them." I looked toward the river. Sometimes leaving a fire alone is the safest way to survive it. She didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, "I never realized how lonely you've been." Neither had I. Not until I stopped carrying everyone else's weight. Inside Hale Dynamics, Director Owens entered the compliance division. Everything remained exactly as I had left it. The shelves were organized. Case numbers aligned perfectly. Every cabinet labeled. An investigator looked surprised. "I've never seen archives this clean." Owens nodded. "Ethan Cross built this department." Another investigator inserted a government access card into the central evidence server. The monitor came alive. Thousands of records appeared. Emails, contracts, voice recordings, internal memos, video files. The youngest investigator frowned. "These files haven't been altered." "No." Owens answered quietly. "They've been preserved." One folder immediately caught her attention. Board objections, Ethan Cross. She opened it. The first document appeared. Proposal rejected. Reason, potential fraud exposure. Submitted by Ethan Cross. Board decision, overruled. Second document. Recommendation, suspend offshore transfers. Reason, regulatory risk. Decision, denied. Third, fourth, fifth, hundreds. Every warning, every ignored recommendation, every objection carried one identical digital signature. Ethan Cross. Owens slowly leaned back. He wasn't protecting himself. One investigator looked confused. "What do you mean?" He documented every attempt to stop them. So, he did exactly what compliance officers are supposed to do. Silence spread through the room. For months they had suspected my involvement. Now, the evidence suggested the opposite. Meanwhile, Adrian watched surveillance footage from his office. His hands trembled. "They can't prove intent." Marcus paced behind him. "They have emails. We'll say Ethan forged them." Victor remained seated, older than he had looked only yesterday. "No." Both sons stared at him. Victor's voice was barely audible. "He never forged anything." Marcus frowned. "Father, I ignored every report he submitted." Adrian slowly turned. "You knew?" Victor closed his eyes. "I just never believed consequences would arrive." The room fell silent. For the first time, no one blamed me. Not because they trusted me, because they had begun recognizing themselves. At noon, Director Owens requested a private meeting. Not with the Hales. With me. We met in a quiet government office overlooking the courthouse. She placed several thick folders on the table. "I owe you an apology." "You don't. We suspected you." "You should have." "You understand? I managed compliance. If corruption existed, I was the obvious suspect." She studied me carefully. "Yet you never interfered." "I followed procedure." She opened one folder. Inside were copies of my handwritten notes from years earlier. Each ended the same way. "If the board rejects corrective action, record dissent and preserve evidence." Owens looked genuinely impressed. "You were preparing for this long before our investigation began." "I was preparing for failure." "Whose?" "The company's." Director Owens slid another folder across the table. This one was thinner. No corporate logos. No financial records. just photographs. The first showed a warehouse at night. The second captured unmarked trucks. The third displayed stacks of electronic equipment being loaded without inventory documentation. She watched my reaction. You've seen these before. Yes. Why didn't you report them directly? I did. She flipped through another file. There are 6 internal reports. There were 8. Owens paused. You know exactly how many? I wrote them. She found the final 2. Both had been stamped with the same red mark. No further action required. She frowned. Victor Hale approved these. He delegated the decision. To whom? Marcus. Owens sighed. So the investigation was buried by the very people under investigation. Yes. She leaned back in her chair. For years. Yes. She closed the folders. You understand something? What? If you had destroyed these records, none of this would exist. I know. Why didn't you? I looked through the office window toward the courthouse steps below. Lawyers hurried through the rain, carrying briefcases. Everyone looked busy. Everyone looked certain they controlled their own futures. I kept believing someone inside the family would eventually choose integrity. And when they didn't, I stopped believing. Owens remained silent for several moments. Then she spoke softly. You're free to leave. I wasn't under arrest. No, you never really were. Across town, panic had turned into desperation. Marcus burst into Victor's office carrying several newspapers. Every front page featured Hale Dynamics. Corporate fraud probe expands. Regulators freeze executive assets. Internal documents reveal years of warnings. Marcus threw the papers onto the desk. This is Ethan. Victor looked at him with exhausted eyes. No. It has to be. No. Then who? Victor answered without hesitation. You. Marcus froze. You ignored him. You mocked him. You signed approvals without reading them. You called caution weakness. Marcus shook his head violently. We can still fix this. How? We'll say Ethan controlled compliance. Victor laughed for the first time in days. It wasn't a happy laugh. It sounded tired. Broken. You still don't understand. Marcus frowned. What? The reason we're losing isn't because Ethan attacked us. Victor slowly stood, leaning heavily on his cane. We're losing because he finally stopped protecting us. The words hung in the air like a sentence already passed. That evening, my apartment buzzer rang. When I opened the door, I found an elderly janitor standing outside. Mr. Lewis. He had worked at Hale Dynamics longer than almost anyone. He held a small cardboard box. I thought you'd want this. Inside lay a worn leather notebook. My notebook. The one I had assumed disappeared during the office cleanout. I found it behind a cabinet. I accepted it carefully. Thank you. He smiled. You know, I watched you work for 7 years. I looked up. You were always the last person to leave. He chuckled. And the only executive who ever learned my name. Emotion caught unexpectedly in my throat. So I figured. You deserve to get something back. After he left, I opened the notebook. Most pages contained ordinary reminders. Meeting schedules, legal references, compliance checklists. Near the back, a folded photograph slipped onto the floor. It showed the entire Hale executive team from 5 years earlier. Everyone was smiling. Everyone stood shoulder to shoulder. On the back, written in Claire's handwriting, were 6 simple words. Thank you for holding us together. I stared at the sentence for a long time. Then, for the first time since signing away everything, I quietly allowed myself to grieve. Not for the company I had lost, but for the family I had spent 7 years believing could still be saved. 3 days later, every major business network carried the same headline. Hale Dynamics executives to testify under oath. The media called it the corporate hearing of the decade. Commentators speculated. Investors panicked. Former employees spoke anonymously. Everyone wanted someone to blame. For the first time in years, I had nowhere to be. Until Director Owens called. The prosecution wants your testimony. I expected that. They're requesting it voluntarily. I'll appear. She hesitated. They also offered witness protection. I looked out the apartment window. The rain had finally stopped. No. You've considered the risks? I have. They'll accuse you. They already have. They may insult you publicly. They've done that for years. Owens smiled faintly through the phone. You really don't carry resentment, do you? I carry records. Not grudges. The courthouse overflowed long before the hearing began. Journalists crowded every entrance. Cameras flashed without pause. Employees of Hale Dynamics gathered in uneasy silence. Some looked frightened. Others looked angry. A few simply looked exhausted. I entered through a side entrance arranged by the investigators. No dramatic escort. No attempt to hide my identity. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere felt strangely restrained. Justice rarely sounded dramatic. It sounded procedural. Judge Eleanor Brooks adjusted her glasses. This hearing concerns allegations of corporate fraud, evidence suppression, unlawful financial transfers, and executive misconduct. Her gaze swept across the defendant's table. Victor Hale sat in the center. His shoulders had aged years in only days. Adrian stared at a stack of legal documents without reading them. Marcus kept glancing toward the gallery, searching for sympathetic faces. He found none. Claire sat several rows behind them. Alone. When she noticed me entering, she gave the smallest nod. Nothing more. It was enough. The prosecution called its first witnesses. IT specialists, financial analysts, regulatory officers. Each described facts, dates, logs, transfers, digital signatures. No speculation, only evidence. Hours passed. Then, the prosecution calls Ethan Cross. The courtroom shifted almost imperceptibly. Hundreds of eyes followed me as I walked toward the witness stand. The oath was administered. I sat. The prosecutor spoke first. Mr. Cross, how long did you serve as Chief Compliance Officer of Hale Dynamics? 7 years. What were your responsibilities? Ensuring legal compliance, documenting executive decisions, preserving corporate records, and reporting regulatory risks. Were your recommendations always accepted? No. Can you estimate how often they were rejected? I don't estimate. He smiled slightly. You have records? Yes. A folder was placed before me. Not mine. The government's. The prosecutor opened it. Please identify Exhibit 21. I glanced down. My written objection regarding offshore transfers. Dated March 14th, 5 years ago. And the board's response. Rejected. The prosecutor turned another page. Exhibit 37. My recommendation to suspend unauthorized procurement. Rejected. Another. Another. Each carried my signature. Each carried the board's rejection. Each quietly dismantled years of public assumptions. No speeches. No accusations. Just documents. The prosecutor finally asked, did you ever destroy corporate evidence? No. Did anyone instruct you to? Repeatedly. A murmur spread through the courtroom. The prosecutor remained calm. Did you comply? No. Why? Because preserving evidence was my legal duty. Nothing more needed saying. The defense attorney rose slowly. He adjusted his tie before approaching the witness stand. Mr. Cross. Good afternoon. You claim extraordinary integrity. I've made no such claim. You expect this court to believe you spent 7 years surrounded by corruption without participating? I expect the court to examine evidence. A few reporters exchanged glances. The attorney continued. You benefited financially from Hale Dynamics. I received a salary. A generous one. Yes. So you remained despite knowing about misconduct. I remained to document it and recommend corrective action. Convenient. No. Professional. The attorney narrowed his eyes. If you truly cared, why didn't you resign sooner? For the first time that day, I paused. Not because I lacked an answer. Because the truthful one carried weight. I believed people could change. The courtroom became completely still. I believed warnings mattered. I believed accountability could come from inside the company. And when that hope ended, I signed my resignation. The attorney frowned. You signed without resistance. Yes. Why? Because they no longer needed my permission to make bad decisions. A faint laugh escaped somewhere in the gallery before the judge restored order. The attorney changed tactics. Isn't it true you designed the compliance system that exposed my clients? Yes. So you created the mechanism that led to this investigation. I created a legal audit system, knowing it could incriminate them, knowing it would preserve facts. The attorney hesitated. Facts, not accusations. Facts were difficult to argue against. He finally returned to his seat. Director Owens requested permission to present one final exhibit. The judge approved. Large courtroom monitors illuminated. A timeline appeared. Every executive decision, every internal objection, every unauthorized access, every financial transfer, each event connected chronologically. At the center of the timeline stood one unmistakable pattern. Whenever Ethan Cross submitted a warning, the board rejected it. Whenever the board rejected it, the risk increased. Whenever the risk increased, executives approved larger violations. Then came the final entry. Executive authority transferred. Followed minutes later by unauthorized archive access. Then, mass evidence downloads. Then, emergency offshore transfers. Then, government alerts generated automatically. The prosecutor addressed the court. The investigation accelerated only after the defendants obtained unrestricted authority over systems they believed contained exploitable information. He looked toward Adrian. They triggered every safeguard themselves. Silence settled across the courtroom. Marcus slowly lowered his head. For the first time, no explanation remained. No conspiracy. No hidden enemy. Only consequences. Victor requested permission to speak. His attorney tried to stop him. He ignored the warning. The elderly chairman stood with visible effort. His voice shook. Everything presented today is true. Gasps spread across the courtroom. I blamed the wrong man. He looked directly at me. Not at the judge. Not at the prosecutors. At me. I mistook patience for weakness. I mistook honesty for inconvenience. I mistook loyalty. His voice broke. For something I could always demand. No one interrupted him. Not even his lawyer. Victor closed his eyes. When Ethan stopped protecting us, we discovered we had never learned to protect ourselves. He sat down slowly. No dramatic outburst followed. No one applauded. The truth didn't need applause. It simply remained standing after every excuse had collapsed. The judge recessed the hearing pending final sentencing and civil rulings. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed toward every exit. I left through the same quiet side door I had entered. No victory. No celebration. Only the steady realization that the burden I had carried for 7 years had finally, and irrevocably, been set down. The city moved on faster than I expected. A week after the hearing, another company replaced Hale Dynamics on the front page of the financial papers. Markets recovered. Television panels found new scandals to debate. The world had never stopped for one family. It never would. I folded the newspaper and placed it on the cafe table. Across from me, Director Amelia Owens stirred her coffee. You seem disappointed. I'm surprised. About what? How quickly people forget. She smiled gently. They don't. They simply learn to keep living. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The cafe overlooked a quiet park where children chased pigeons across damp grass. It felt impossibly distant from boardrooms and courtrooms. Owens slid a thin folder across the table. I have an offer. I retired. This isn't about enforcement. I opened the folder. Inside was a proposal from the National Corporate Ethics Commission, a newly established advisory office. Independent. No shareholders. No family dynasties. Only one responsibility: preventing companies from repeating the mistakes that had destroyed Hale Dynamics. You recommended me? I recommended the only person I've met who refused to destroy evidence, even when it would have saved his career. I closed the folder without answering. I need time. You've earned it. Claire called that evening. I'd like to see you. Her voice sounded calmer than it had in months. We met in the botanical garden where we used to spend Sunday mornings before work consumed our lives. Autumn had begun painting the trees in deep gold and crimson. For a while we simply walked. I visited Father. I nodded. How is he? He looks. She searched for the word. Smaller. Power had always made Victor seem larger than life. Without it, age had finally caught him. Claire stopped beside a pond. He asked about you. What did you tell him? That you're finally sleeping. A faint smile escaped me. I am. He cried. The words lingered between us. I've never seen him cry before. I believe you. Claire looked at the water. I spent years asking you to understand my family. She laughed bitterly. I never once asked whether they understood you. You were trying to keep everyone together. So were you. She turned toward me. I don't know if our marriage survived this. I appreciated her honesty. Neither do I. I don't want promises. I can't make any. I just wanted the truth. The truth. I looked around the peaceful garden. Is that forgiveness and reconciliation aren't the same thing? She nodded slowly. I understand. For the first time since everything collapsed, neither of us tried to force an answer. Sometimes honesty left space instead of conclusions. That night, I opened the old leather notebook again. Between meeting notes and legal reminders, I found a page I didn't remember writing. It contained a single sentence. A system should never depend on one person's sacrifice. I stared at it for a long time. Then I quietly tore the page out, folded it, placed it in my wallet, not as a reminder of the past, as a promise for whatever came next. The commission's headquarters occupied a modest glass building overlooking the harbor. No luxurious executive floor, no private elevators, no portraits celebrating founders. Only open workspaces filled with lawyers, auditors, and analysts who debated regulations over ordinary coffee. It felt strangely refreshing. During my first week, I met Maya Chun. She directed training for newly appointed compliance officers. She greeted me with a firm handshake. "So you're Ethan Cross. I've heard the same about you." "I doubt it." She laughed. "I've been told you're impossible to impress." "I prefer evidence." "Good. So do I." Over the following days, we redesigned reporting procedures for dozens of companies. Anonymous whistleblower channels, independent evidence storage, automatic board notifications. Everything I had once wished Hale Dynamics would embrace voluntarily. No one treated me like a miracle worker. No one expected impossible sacrifices. We simply worked. One afternoon, a young analyst approached my desk. "Mr. Cross." "Yes. I'm reviewing a case." He looked embarrassed. "The CEO wants us to remove several compliance findings." "What should I do?" Years earlier, I would have answered with legal references. This time I simply smiled. "What does the law require?" He thought for a moment. "Preserve everything. Then preserve everything." He nodded with visible relief. Sometimes people didn't need heroes. They needed permission to do the right thing. Months passed. Winter arrived quietly. Hale Dynamics officially entered court-supervised restructuring. Thousands of employees kept their jobs after independent management took control. The company survived, not because the old leadership deserved another chance, but because innocent people shouldn't lose everything for someone else's greed. One snowy afternoon, Mr. Lewis, the elderly janitor, visited my new office. He looked around with approval. Bigger desk, lighter workload. He chuckled. And happier eyes. I poured him tea. "What brings you here?" He handed me a small envelope. Former employees collected this. Inside lay hundreds of handwritten notes. Some thanked me for protecting their pensions. Others apologized for believing the rumors. One simply read, "You taught us that integrity isn't loud." I had to set the envelope down before answering. There were too many voices. Too many years. Too many moments I thought no one had noticed. Mr. Lewis stood to leave. "You know?" "What?" "They didn't understand your silence." "No. But they understand it now." After he left, I remained by the window until evening. Snow fell gently over the harbor. For years I believed peace came after winning. I had been wrong. Peace came the day I stopped carrying responsibilities that never belonged to me. And for the first time in a very long while, tomorrow felt like an opportunity instead of another emergency. Spring arrived with quiet confidence. Cherry blossoms lined the streets outside the Corporate Ethics Commission, scattering pale petals across the sidewalks each morning. 6 months had passed since the verdict. The trials were over. The appeals had failed. The headlines had faded. Life had continued. I had almost convinced myself that chapter was finally closed. Then my assistant knocked gently on my office door. "Mr. Cross." "Yes." "You have a visitor." "Who is it?" She hesitated. "Chairman Victor Hale." For a long moment, I didn't answer. Then I simply nodded. "Please let him in." Victor entered slowly, leaning on the same cane that had once echoed across Hale Dynamics' boardroom. Only now, it sounded different. Not commanding, just necessary. His expensive suits had been replaced by a simple gray coat. His shoulders seemed smaller, older. He stopped several feet from my desk. "I won't take much of your time. You've already come. You may as well sit." He looked surprised, then quietly accepted. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, he reached into his coat and placed a small wooden box on my desk. "I found this while cleaning my office." I opened it. Inside rested my old employee identification badge, the first one I had ever received. Its corners were worn. The photograph was faded. "You kept it." Victor lowered his eyes. "I kept more than I deserved." Silence settled between us. I didn't come to ask for forgiveness. He spoke carefully, choosing each word. "I know I have no right. I came because there was something I never said. I waited. When you joined Hale Dynamics, I thought I had hired another talented executive. When you married Claire, I thought I had gained another useful family member." He smiled sadly. "The truth was that I had been entrusted with a son, and I spent 7 years treating him like an employee. The room remained painfully quiet. Victor's hands trembled. I buried every warning you gave. I rewarded arrogance. I punished honesty. And when everything collapsed, I still searched for someone else to blame. His voice weakened. There is no excuse. I looked at the elderly man before me. He no longer resembled the chairman who had controlled boardrooms with a glance. Consequences had stripped away every title, leaving only a father, only a man. I don't hate you. His eyes widened. I know. That somehow makes this harder. It should. He nodded slowly. I agree. As he prepared to leave, he paused at the doorway. Claire asked me to tell you something. I looked up. She finalized the divorce papers. I know. She also refused every financial settlement. I wasn't surprised. She said, Victor swallowed, that this is the first decision in her life she wanted to make without anyone else's expectations. A faint smile crossed my face. That sounds like Claire. Victor nodded. It does. He left without another word. The office felt strangely peaceful after the door closed. There had been no dramatic reconciliation, no miraculous healing, only truth. Sometimes, that was enough. 1 year later, the auditorium held nearly 500 newly appointed compliance officers from across the country. Some looked nervous, others eager. Many carried notebooks filled with questions about laws, regulations, and corporate governance. They expected a lecture. Instead, I walked onto the stage carrying only a single sheet of paper. The room quieted. I looked across hundreds of unfamiliar faces, then folded the paper without reading it. I was asked to teach you how to prevent corporate failure. A few people began taking notes. I can't. Confused expressions spread through the audience. No policy, no software, no investigation, no compliance department can save people who believe they are above responsibility. The room became completely silent. What you can do is preserve the truth. I held up an ordinary folder. This looks unremarkable, but inside are facts. And facts remain patient. They don't become louder because someone ignores them. They don't disappear because powerful people dislike them. They simply wait. I thought of 7 years of unanswered reports, late nights, locked filing cabinets, the sound of a pen signing away everything I had built, and the strange peace that had followed. I smiled. There will be moments when people ask you to look away, moments when silence feels safer, moments when doing your job costs promotions, friendships, or careers. I paused. When those moments come, remember this. Your responsibility is not to control other people's choices. It is to make sure the truth survives them. No applause came immediately. No one reached for their phones. The audience simply listened. Sometimes silence carried more respect than noise ever could. After the seminar ended, I stepped outside. The afternoon sun warmed the stone steps. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers through the plaza. Across the street, people hurried toward ordinary lives. Parents picked up children from school. Office workers laughed over coffee. Street musicians played for passing strangers. The world was beautifully, wonderfully ordinary. My phone vibrated. A message from Claire. I heard your speech went well. I smiled. After a moment, I replied, I hope you found peace. Her answer came almost immediately. I'm learning. I hope you have too. I looked up at the open sky. For years I believed silence meant surrender. I had been wrong. Silence could be dignity. It could be restraint. It could be the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needed to win every argument because the truth would eventually speak for itself. I slipped my phone into my pocket and walked forward without looking back. Not because the past no longer existed, but because it no longer defined the road ahead.